Welcome to Killer POV. I'm one of your three hosts, Elric Kane. Joining me, Rebekah McKendry.
Hello.
Sometimes known for Fangoria.
Sometimes.
And also, Rob Galluzzo.
Hey now.
Who's been in Arizona.
Yeah, both of you guys have been away this weekend. I've been all alone here in LA. It's been really boring.
We're desert rats.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's really exhausting.
What have you been doing?
Exhausted?
I was far more tired. I went away to get R&R and came back more tired.
Right. Yeah, I went to Arizona to see family, came back. As soon as I got back, my superior or supervisor at FEARnet is on vacation now. So FEARnet's been kind of a little hectic this week because it's just been me for the web stuff. And then today...
Did you kill him?
No, I did not. He's just on vacation.
Okay. We'll see, right?
Yeah, you'll find out. So today was FEARnet. I just got out of a Dexter wrap-up podcast.
Awesome. I saw that.
For those that don't know, I also record and produce the Dexter podcast for Showtime. And came straight here, which is why I have a beer and why I sound tired. But I would rather be nowhere else. I love doing the Killer POV show. So
what about you, you who didn't leave town?
I will have to counter you guys because what I did do was last night I hung out at Andrew Cash, who is a member of the horror industry here. He's editing a film for me, and I hung out at his place, and he has cats.
Uh-oh.
And so by the time I left, I was like swollen and sneezing, and and I'm allergic to them, but that really doesn't matter. I still love cats, so I'm like picking them up and kissing them, and who's a cute kitty and all this stuff.
Like the Incredible Melting Man.
Yeah. So I woke up this morning with a horrible sinus headache, and so I took a lot of Sudafed. So I'm freaking pumped, boys.
Nice. She does look far more energized. It's going to be some crazy
pumped for the both
discussion.
Of us. Yeah.
I went to Vegas to get a break, but I also have wanted to see the Goretorium for a long time.
Oh, how was it?
I was just telling Rob that I felt it was very much like Eli Roth's movies. There was some nice design elements.
Rapey and boring?
There was nice design elements. It looked good. It had a couple decent scares, but generally it was hollow and kind of silly. I find the problem with some of his movies, as Hostel 1 is the first half of it is so cartoony, the acting, that I can't get scared by a movie that places its performances there. If they're treated like real characters, I can get scared when they're treated like that. So I felt the Goretorium was very similar, and it was very short. And I would, if you go get half price tickets, because it is not worth $40. I'm sorry, you go through that thing in like 10, 11 minutes.
Really?
And it's short. It felt shorter than some of the Universal horror haunts to me. But it is designed very nicely. It has a host who walks you through, and so a lot of it's down to the performance of that host. And to me, it's like I'd rather just walk through a haunted space. It had some really nice. It had one trick effect that I still can't work out how they did it. It was like a woman being dragged under something, and as far as I could tell, I couldn't see her legs anywhere. I couldn't see where she went. It was probably like the ultimate smoke and mirrors trick. And it had a couple, and it is nice design. There's a great elevator sequence, but it's just over really quick. And to think that somebody would pay $40 for that is crazy. It's like,
wow,
it doesn't make any sense at all. But it was still fun. I mean, I still had a good time. But the girls I went in, there was a whole bunch of girls who went in. You go in groups, and they were like terrified, but nothing had even happened, and they're terrified. The buildup was terrifying. The scariest part of the ride, the whole thing is there's a period where you're just in darkness, and that just reminds you that is in horror films also the scariest part, where you're just in darkness. The anticipation of something happening was far scarier than the actual happenings. But it's fun. It's Vegas. You come out and there's a bar, and it was still a good time. But I was having gone to all these amazing Universal haunted attractions. You kind of get spoiled, I guess.
Yeah, they're Halloween Horror Nights. I mean, they kind of
it goes
pull out all the stops.
Oh yeah, that Sing one was so cool. The thing.
Did you get a chance to do Evil Dead the musical?
I didn't, and I only noticed it was there towards the end. I was walking. There's a lot of horror things there. I was surprised in Vegas. A lot of we were talking about slot machines. I won like a couple $100 on a Godzilla game. There's an awesome Jaws game. There was like I found an Alfred Hitchcock game. I tweeted you about. It was just weird that there was all these.
There's also a haunted house that I've been to in Vegas before that I absolutely love. The guy who runs it just opened up a haunted house in New York called Times Scares.
Oh, cool.
But the one in Vegas is called the Horror Dome, and it's really good.
Huh.
So for a couple of years there, Fangoria, one of my main jobs around Halloween time was they would fly me to they'd pick, but each year it was like one of the best haunted houses in the country, and I would have to review it. And so I have seen 5 top of the haunted houses in the country.
Wow, that's a good,
it was awesome. And I
gig.
get to keep doing it. Like they'll send me again this year. So like last year I went to Erebus in Michigan, which is in it's right outside of Detroit and Pontiac, Michigan. And the town is just desolate except for this enormous haunted house that takes almost 45 minutes to walk through. And it was amazing. And so there's, after doing that, I'm really picky about my haunted houses. So like the Universal ones don't really impress me.
Well, the design are good. If I'm the kind of horror guy that if I know there's actors, because if you make films in any capacity, you're so used to, there's set design, there's acting. I don't really get scared by those things. But if you put me, I spent my wedding night in the Queen Mary, which is, notoriously middle of the night, lights turn on, showers turn on, all sorts of weird shit happens there. Freaks the hell. I mean, I'm the biggest scaredy cat when it comes to real things, but when it comes to fake things, it's really, which is interesting. It's same, it's just that like, oh geez, I don't even like being alone in a big house if it's just me,
totally.
And I remember talking to Drew about that. He said, it's funny, all horror guys are the biggest chickens in real life when it, but anything where there's performance part, you're just like, you come out because you know they're actors.
Yeah, totally.
That's interesting. What about movies? Did you guys see anything? I saw an amazing film. I just can't rate enough. It was called Texas Chainsaw. And it was this beautiful...
Was this the new one?
I think it was some original film. I don't think it had any lineage. But I was struck. I'm sure most of you have already seen it, but I got it from the Blu-ray. I swore I wouldn't see it when it came to theaters because it just looked so bad. But I will say this about it. I did feel kind of overwhelmingly that it had a very original, interesting idea at its core that was executed terribly. Like it was like one of the worst films I've seen in a long time, but I thought the twist was better than any of the sequels. Okay. I thought the idea in there, I was excited. I was like, oh wow, that would have been such an interesting storyline by someone else with a different cast and a different production schedule. You know what I mean? Like once I made that twist, I was like, and I'm not saying that just in case you haven't seen it yet, but right in the middle, it's like, okay, that would have been a cool film. But when you open with a film with 5 characters who there's no way they know each other, let alone they're having sex. These 5 characters were the least likely.
And they were all annoying.
And they're all cartoon characters, stock characters. We have to tick all the boxes of, and that's what takes me instantly out of the film. But there was in the middle where I was like, oh, well, what a waste. You had this that could have been the first genuinely interesting sequel to a franchise, and
Yeah, because it starts out pretty strong with the end of the original.
Right.
And then there's a chunk that's like 25 minutes of just unbearable kids that I don't want to be with. But they're out of the movie pretty fast.
Yeah,
that's
it's
what I remember.
Quick. I mean, it all moved like...
great, good. They're all out of here because I didn't like any of them anyway.
Yeah.
And you're right. It could have been interesting for that other portion.
And the lead actress is pretty fun to watch. Like, she didn't bother me. And so between that and the twist, I was like, oh, it's almost a movie I could have enjoyed. But because of the generic way it's aimed at a generic audience. That's part of the problem. It's not aimed for horror fans. It's not aimed for people who love the franchise. It's just like this, let's try to hit as many people as we can. Yeah. And it worked for the first weekend.
And that's it.
Yeah, and that's it.
And then it fell.
Right, and then it declines. But it was interesting because I didn't think I was going to go see it. But it probably wasn't as terrible as I was expecting because I was expecting like the worst film ever. And it wasn't quite the worst.
Right.
But I would say it's only interesting if you're interested in what this twist we're kind of talking about. It's not even a twist as much as a story turn, But so I had some interesting moments in it.
All right.
I watched Tenement, which was for a piece that I wrote for FEARnet, and apparently no one else has ever seen this movie but me.
I've seen the box for it in the cult section, but I've never seen it. And I didn't read your piece yet, so go ahead, tell us about it.
I'm hurt. No,
well, you crank them out like every other day. I can't even keep up.
I like writing, so it's kind of like I'd rather do that than say watch television and things like that. So it's like my relaxation. But I watched Tenement, which I had never seen. I hadn't seen it recently. I've seen it like 4 times, but it was when I was a kid. And I shouldn't admit to like watching this when I was a kid because it's a really disturbing movie. But for some reason, we had a VHS copy of it in my house, so I saw it multiple times. It's directed by Roberta Findlay, who is one of those great women exploitation directors that I love, definitely.
And actresses, right?
And
I thought she did.
I know that she also did the cinematography. So in my mind, I kind of put her and Doris Wishman both, and we'll talk about Doris in a bit when we have our guest on, because I know he's working on a project on her right now.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm being interviewed for. And anyways, I always put Roberta and Doris up on this pedestal of these amazing women who were directing and shooting and doing cinematography way back when women in the industry were completely unheard of, but they were doing it in these kind of, exploitive and horror things. And anyway, so Roberta Findlay directs it. It was made in 1985, and it is entirely set in this tenement in New York City, South Bronx. And Rob, when you watch it, you'll look at it the same way I did, where you look and go, oh God, that place would cost like $700,000 right now. And I mean, they're in these like little one-room shanties that you just know are a fortune right now. But there's a gang of druggies and, you know, punk kids that live in the basement, and they get them arrested, and they're out within like 2 hours and then come back and vow to kill everyone in the building. So then it becomes a siege film. It's very much kind of like the Raid, where, you know, the gang has taken control of the building and is moving through the floors trying to kill everybody, and everybody slowly moving up to the roof is like being herded up to the roof, and then there's a final showdown. It's really brutal. There's several rapes. There's a scene where a guy shoots up rat poison. It's totally brutal.
While raping?
No. I'm sure they would have worked that in if they could have. So, yeah.
So it's rapey, but not boring.
Yeah,
it's rapey, but not boring.
Adrenaline pumping and rapey.
I described it. I described it in the article as batteries not included with a broom rape.
Oh, nice.
Which is pretty intense.
Wow.
Yeah, it's intense. So, but yeah, it's that batteries not included style feel where it's like this old building of, you know, a mix. You've got the Jewish couple and the African-American couple and the Mexican landlord, and, you know, but everybody bands together for this one thing instead of robots. It's, you know, this herd of crazy junkie punks.
That's why we need aliens. I feel like if we really did have aliens, everyone would get along so well. It's the only thing we could ban.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about real horror, yesterday some guy in the middle of a street in London like hacked a man to pieces.
I was so disturbed.
It's one of the most disturbing things I've ever heard of in my life.
He like did a cell phone interview right afterwards where he's like standing there holding the hatchet.
In the middle of a broad daylight, they run over a guy, they get out with hatchets, and they start hacking a guy up on a British street while people are watching. Spectators are filming it.
Oh my God.
It's like, but it was purposeful. It's like, but like, that's when you go, oh my God, like horror films have nothing on the randomness of real violence.
And that disturbs the crap out of me.
It's terrifying.
So
it's terrifying that somebody would be able to justify it. That's what I get scared of. People who are able to rationalize an action that's so clearly insane to themselves. And they're probably functioning as normal people. That's not insane. That's what's scary. And you know, people like Ted Bundy were able to do that too, to an extent. They weren't rationalizing what they did, but they're able to. Like OJ is a good. Let's say OJ did. No, if he did, but in his mind he probably didn't. You know, the ability to kind of tuck it away is also pretty frightening.
Well, in a totally irrational move, I'll take you to the other film I watched this week. I watched My Soul to Keep again.
Oh boy,
the Wes Craven one.
Yeah.
Oh, why would you do that to yourself?
I told you, irrational. I
hope Brian Collins is listening.
No,
it's a horrible film.
I wrote a defense article about it. I haven't read it yet though.
I know.
So a couple of days ago, when we were getting ready for trivia night last week, I made a joke. I was like, "I'm doing an entire round about My Soul to Keep." Brian Collins, I hope you're ready. And so, you know, and then he started launching back on Facebook, you know, it's such a good film. It's such a good film. And my husband had never seen it. And he was like, I don't get it. Brian says it's great. And you say it's the worst film ever. We have to watch it. And I was like, please don't make me. And Dave was like, no, we're watching it. So we actually paid $3.99 to rent it on Amazon. I paid $4 for that stupid movie again.
On Netflix for free.
And no, it isn't.
Isn't it? Used to be. I saw it that way.
Because that was my first trial, and it's not on Vudu for free or any of them. So anyway, we pay $4 to rent it, and I watched it again. Freaking California Condors! I swear, it doesn't get better with age.
It's like the worst. It's like a terrible, terrible Scream sequel. Like it's like if there was a Scream 7, it would be My Soul.
It's like an amalgamation of all of Wes Craven's best ideas that turned into bad movies.
Yeah.
Like there's like Shocker in there, you know, the killer, but he's spread out into like. Yeah. What is it, like 7
13.
souls? 13, there it is.
And
but Shocker at least has imagination. That's why Shocker can be saved. You know, it's still not a good movie, but Shocker has got like more fun things going. It's the effects that are terrible in Shocker.
It really is like Wes Craven decided to write a movie for 13-year-olds while he was 70, because it's got all this, like, I'll call it like Juno style lingo that is not used, makes no sense. It's very awkward. Like, give him a 3, give him an 8 when they're describing punches.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that. And, you know.
And apparently he was wearing baggy jeans the whole time he shot it, too, which is just sad. It's just like Wes Craven's got his, like, boxers hanging out. He's like, sup, fool.
And they keep saying fang time. We're going to have fang time in the bathroom. And apparently that means
everyone's got to tweet that to Wes Craven tonight.
Fang time.
If it gets too hot, turn up the prayer conditioning.
Oh, God.
What the hell? I know. It was just
like every line is like that.
Yes.
So you're like, am I watching humans have conversations? Because I don't understand anything that anybody's saying.
And I kept thinking, my God, I must be so out of touch. And then I realized I'm not. I'm not out of touch at all. None of this actually exists in real life. No one says these things.
Yeah. It's just a Severn. Who wrote it? Aaron Craven?
Wes Craven, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he wrote it himself.
I assume that's how he got it greenlit. I also I saw it at when the night that it opened because they sent me to review it for Fango.
Yeah.
In 3D. Worst use of 3D ever.
Well, that was
ever.
a post-convert, right?
Yeah, completely. It was like, well, we have to do something with
Desperate
this film.
Hail
Ooh,
Mary.
3D.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually spent a couple days with some Scream Factory titles. I got this week, Town That Dreaded Sundown and The Burning came out.
Oh.
So I revisited both of those. I've actually never seen The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
It's pretty wacky. I mean, I had a bootleg of it once because, it'd been so hard to get for years. So I picked it up at a convention, tried to watch it, and it was so muddy and terrible that I couldn't make it through it. But I popped in the Scream Factory one, and it's like they're doing the horror gods work because there is no reason that movie should look as good as it does.
Right.
Oh my God. I have the Scream Factory version too. It's beautiful.
It's ridiculous how well they cleaned it up and it looks, it just for a movie from 76 that's kind of sleazy and it has no right looking that as good as it does. That's the first thing. Second, I found parts of it kind of creepy because it's based on a true story.
Right. True time.
And, I'm terrified of the Zodiac Killer. Like that's my favorite Fincher movie.
Yeah,
and I find it
That's great.
terribly scary because of that situation. And being how similar this killer was to that whole scenario, I found that aspect of it scary. Like anytime you saw the killer, he's got like the, what they ended up doing in Friday 13th 2 with the sack
bag,
on the head.
yeah.
It looks exactly the same.
He was my influence for The Dump, the film that I directed last year. If you've seen it, it's the rednecky killer. Based off him.
Yeah. Wow. So I thought the scary elements are scary. But then it's like there's three different things going on simultaneously in the movie. One, it's part like docudrama, where there is a narrator like explaining the true case, and then it goes into narrative. And then there's like these out of place comedic elements.
But that was really common at the time.
Was
if you
it?
think like, I always use the example when I've taught lessons on this. Last House from the Left, when you're getting these like horrible acts being done and just this deplorable violence, and then it'll cut to like these cops, these like bumbling cops with these like Keystone-esque, bumbles trying to find these people.
Yeah, what's the other film with Krug in it? House at the Edge of the Park.
House at the Edge of the Park has the same thing too.
It's like terrible, the worst things you've ever seen, and then suddenly some goofy character doing some weird, jokey thing.
Yeah,
that's so bizarre to me.
Surprisingly,
it doesn't work
I think it was
tonally,
kind of a common thing because Tenement does it too.
Driller Killer, all those films.
Yeah, Driller Killer does
like
it. Yeah, it might be like an exploitation trope, I would say, where you mix the extreme violence with this kind of awkward comedy. And in a way, I think that the comedy kind of pulls you out of the awkward horror for long enough that when it sticks you back in, it's kind of more shocking.
Yeah, because there are some pretty shocking bits in terms of the actual violence in it. And the director was Charles Pierce, who also played the lead, not the lead, but he's like the cop the bumbling cop in it that is the comic relief, which is just so odd. But
that is weird.
But yeah, again, pretty cool little movie. Definitely worth seeking out since it hasn't been available for so long. And again, Scream Factory did such an amazing job. The transfer looks amazing. And actually, there's a pretty good commentary on there with this guy that I wrote a book about the true story, and it's moderated by Justin Beam, who does stuff for Fangoria.
Yeah, I love.
So Justin and Justin, to his credit, actually seems to know a lot about both the movie and the actual case. So he kind of keeps the commentary very informative, and it's a really good bonus material for that particular release.
Very cool.
And again, I'll be brief about it, but same thing with The Burning. I mean, every couple of years I revisit it.
Yeah, it's great film.
And again, it's the digital transfer on it is ridiculous. It looks so damn good. And it's like, The Burning should not look this good.
I have like a bad DVD of it where it looks terrible and grainy.
Yeah, Scream did a fantastic job on it. And there's a couple of new features on it, a few new interviews and stuff. There's a Savini segment that's really good, and some footage that he shot on set, which I think might be on the DVD. That might have been carted over, but there's still a bunch of new stuff on there regardless.
Nice. I want an interview with Jason Alexander on that. So bad.
You do?
I do.
Yeah.
He hasn't had one yet.
Yeah, he's never talked about it, right?
No, and I was at a screening in, I think it was Philadelphia, of The Burning a couple years ago, and I never noticed it before, but somebody screamed it out, "Stop touching your hair." And he's like running his hands through his hair the whole movie. And
it was a trivia answer recently. It was a tiebreaker. Remember?
Oh, yeah, I do remember
Jason
that.
Alexander.
That was
and
actually
he stuttered.
the greatest pause of all time.
Jason
Alexander.
Alexander. So.
Speaking of that, we also had a really good shorts nights of horror films that I know you're out of town. Easily the best we've ever had. Like everyone uniformly had it was like a great night of films. Like Root of the Problem was incredible. I mean, it's a beautiful film. I loved
that one.
But the main piece of news from it was that Drew Daywalt showed the first 10 minutes of his feature, and it was just really it's going to be an intense movie. It's going to be in the vein of Don't Look Now and movies like that deal with real loss and then the supernatural, and I think it's going to be really strong. Hopefully. Right?
We'll have him on the show soon.
Yeah. No, it was a really good night. Very exciting to see some work that you're like, oh yeah, that person's going to make a great film, great feature at some point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do we want to bring up this topic that we're going to tackle for this show?
Well, I'd say we just jump right in.
Well, you know what? I just saw something interesting on Facebook. Did you know that, and by the time this airs, it'll be a day off, but apparently this is the day that The Shining opened in theaters back in 1980.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is fitting because we have a very cool. Shining-centric episode and guest.
Yes, our board op, Brian, is bringing him in right now, so we don't even have to stop talking.
Yeah, our guest is going to be Rodney Ascher, who directed the film Room 237, which is a documentary about various theories that different people have about the meaning of Shining. But we'll get to that particular topic later in the show. We're just going to start with a general topic that he can absolutely chime in on, which is just I guess in a way it's what makes Stephen King's work so effective in translation, and often the translations are maybe not kind of loose. It seems to me the more effective ones are less literal, strangely enough.
Yeah. But what talking about the Lawnmower Man?
Yeah, the Lawnmower Man. Sleepwalkers, Mick Garris's vision of, but no, there's something obviously about his work that God, I was looking up Wikipedia. I think there was something like 20.
I printed it.
Yeah, how many words are?
I don't know, because if you include like television adaptations,
yeah, there's way more than 20 at this point.
Yeah,
the 20 something.
Yeah, it's definitely like.
But what's interesting is look at the first 5, and they're the best 5 films.
I was
the first 5 are absolutely
Carrie in the Dead Zone.
Carrie, Dead Zone,
Shining, Creepshow, Cujo,
and Creepshow. The first 5, it's like and then the 6th is Christine, and that seems to be the transition to lesser. I know some people.
Firestarter must be in there.
Firestarter
is
1984. That's in top 10.
But it's interesting how strong out of the gates. It's like they had these directors, but Cronenberg, we're talking about Brian De Palma, Cronenberg, Stanley Kubrick as the first 3 people to adapt your work. And then Romero.
Yeah.
It's, that's not a bad place to be. And Louis Teague, the master of the Animal Attack movie. He made one of my other favorites.
Grizzly?
Alligator.
Alligator. Yeah. It's
Alligator's a solid movie.
It really, because of Sayles' script, I assume, because it's just so clever. John Sayles infuses everything with more character. That's the thing. It doesn't matter how shitty the movie is. Suddenly the characters are talking about receding hairlines half the time, and you're like, it humanizes them so well. But so I don't know what were your first? I guess to start, what were your first Stephen King films you ever saw? What was it? Do you remember what the earliest were?
I remember seeing, let me look at the list. I definitely saw Children of the Corn really, really young. And that one still creeps me out today. Not if I watch, any of the other ones in the franchise. They're kind of laughable. But the original one with Malachi and Isaac, it still totally creeps me out today. So I really, really liked that one. I remember, I was much older, but I really liked Rose Red. For some reason, I still really like that one. It was his one that was based off the Winchester Mystery House, where it was the house that they continued building because she thought that if they stopped, that she was going to be possessed by a spirit. And but I really liked that one for some reason.
Is that the one? Kathy Bates in that one?
No,
that's Dolores Claiborne.
Okay, that's the one I'm mixing up.
Which I only just saw for the first time recently. I just always thought it looked like a kind of a hack rip. It was actually pretty interesting. It was a good story. More of a TV movie, it felt like. But.
Yeah, I'd call it like a really extreme film for Oxygen. I mean, like really extreme, but it's definitely like women's television.
Oh. And with a bit of incest thrown in there. Jennifer Jason Leigh, a little incest, good times.
A little weird. But I also, when I was a kid, I really loved Silver Bullet.
Oh, yeah, no, that was on my list. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, which is funny because these are also films that today don't hold up as well. Like Children of the Corn and Silver Bullet,
neither
not really that good, but I still love them. And
oh my gosh,
Children of the Corn I think freaked me out because I was about the age of all the kids in it.
Yeah, so
and
was
just the idea of kids killing all the parents and then each other.
That opening scene upset me so bad.
Yeah. It was pretty horrific.
Yeah,
I wonder if it still has the same power. I don't know if it does, but
I doubt it. Any film with sequels hasn't got the same power. Because it's like taking a Xerox of something, 5 times. What about you, Rodney?
Well, I mean, I saw a bunch of them, back in the early days, I saw Dead Zone with my parents, which I loved. I mean, I snuck into The Shining when I was a little kid and only made it about 10 minutes in, and this scar that it left is probably in no small part responsible for the existence of Room 237. But I was really excited for Creepshow when that came out, and I was a real comic book kid, so before Silver Bullet came out, I had that Cycle of the Werewolf book with the Bernie Wrightson drawings.
It's beautiful stuff.
It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And of course, Maximum Overdrive. When Stephen King has sat on the sidelines and watched people mangle his work, so now he's going to do it the way that he always intended.
We ran a news story a couple weeks ago that somebody is actually restoring the Goblin truck.
Oh,
they
wow.
found it and are doing a full restoration on it.
I fully support that.
Coming to a convention
Probably
near
Jay
you.
Leno is going to drive by us.
Which, by the way, that's got to be one of the greatest teasers of all time, the Maximum Overdrive one. Have you ever seen that teaser trailer?
I don't remember how it went.
Look it up on YouTube. It's Stephen King.
Yeah.
Like the Goblin truck is behind them, but he comes in out of the light and he's just like, "Hi, I'm Stephen King." There's this whole thing about he's like, so many people have done movies based on my books, and I've learned if you want to do something right, you got to do it yourself. And it's like pretty much him saying like, I'm going to scare the hell out of you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like addressing you and like about
It's
how
so William
terrifying.
Castle.
It's amazing. It's really a great teaser.
Norman Mailer did one for Tough Guys Don't Dance,
Yeah.
where he's reading negative reviews and getting pissed off. And
It's a great movie, though. It's
a cool movie, yeah.
I like all his movies. I like when he gets into fights with Rip Torn. And
Right, that's
gets
amazing.
punched in the face by Torn. That was pretty crazy. Yeah, my earliest film of all, my first horror film was Creepshow, and I've talked about it before. That just absolutely scarred me. The one segment of the crate just scarred me. But the one I remember leaving such an impression, and even now, anytime I rewatch it, I think it's the best tone of dread ever achieved in a film is Dead Zone. I think the kind of it just keeps building and building, and even the look of it and the ice and just everything about that film.
We keep going back to that tunnel at night.
Yeah. It's a really eerie. And I remember seeing a Walken on Inside the Actors Studio a long time ago, and he was talking about how he's deathly scared of guns. And at close range, where him and Sean Penn had to point guns, he was just terrified. But he said that Cronenberg used that in the film, that every time he psychically touched someone, Cronenberg shot a gun. Oh. and it made him, that jump was completely real.
Yeah.
And that fright that he felt. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But it's just a movie that just does not age. Similar to The Shining, though The Shining obviously has something else going on, which we're going to get to, the many things. But it does. I remember seeing Shining for the first time. I was in a church choir as a little kid, like really young. I'm not kidding. And I saw it the day before and went to the next day. I was telling everyone about it, and they all had seen it on TV. It was on in New Zealand, and no one liked it. Everyone I said to, that was the best thing I've ever seen. I can't even believe what I watched. Like, just couldn't. It felt like my mind had somehow expanded, and they were all just like, it wasn't very good, it wasn't scary, and just all these kids. And I was really, and all those people who said that went on 20 years later, and it's all of their favorite films now. Wow. Everyone who didn't like it, it's now that group of my friends who they grew to like it, but I knew from the first moment seeing that something was going on.
Yeah, it's weird the effect that movie has on different people. Yeah, because for me, I think it was. I've said before, well, in terms of favorite King stuff, I said in previous episodes, Dead Zone's by far my favorite. Mm-hmm. It's just my favorite Cronenberg, King, Walken thing they've ever done. And it was a big thing.
I was getting ready to say, I was just looking over this list and I completely left it off.
Yeah, I mean,
because that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. It's another one that I question if it holds up today.
Yeah, it's heavily flawed. It has a lot of parts that just don't work. They're very TV-ish.
All the stuff with the kids is pretty great.
Yeah, it's when they get to adults. But I don't know, even the adult stuff, like in the Chinese restaurant when all the weird stuff starts happening and they go to Mrs. Jenkins' house. I mean, there's some creepy stuff there.
Oh, no, I'm remembering one. Just the one image from Salem's Lot.
Oh, yeah.
Where the kid's friend is floating outside of the window, tapping on the glass.
I think that scarred us all.
Oh,
we talked about that in a prior episode.
That moment
that
just
destroyed
fries your neurons.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the scariest things. But in terms of The Shining, it's funny because I have pretty distinct memories of most horror movies and how they affected me. But I have a very vague memory of. I remember American Werewolf in London and Shining were the two that I could never get through because I'd see pieces and they'd scare the crap out of me. So like I saw them in a couple minutes at a time, and then an image would happen, like, the lady in the tub in The Shining, for example. And I was like, it's too young. It was too young for that image. It didn't, or just Danny like opening his mouth wide. And for some reason that was like terrifying to me. So I feel like when I was young, it took me a long time to actually see the movie. And then when I finally built up the courage, at this point I had watched, It and Christine and all these other King movies. When I finally watched it, I don't think I fully got it the first time. Because I was like, all right, I've overcome my fear. I'm not scared of this anymore. But I don't know if I like this or not. And I think a big part of it is I did not understand the ending at all. But again, you're like 12 years old and you're like, wait, he's in the picture? I don't understand.
Well, but that picture is presented in a way that seems like this is the rosebud moment of the movie.
Right.
Like this is the solution to the mystery we've been waiting for all along. But it kind of settles on that date, July 4th, 1921, which isn't a date that anyone has talked about. So if this is sitting in the place in most movies where, Bruce Willis was a ghost all along, you're supposed to have gotten it and to leave the theater, sort of satisfied. If anything, it opens up a new mystery. It makes you want to go back and see it again. And then more and more things start to fall apart. I know, like the woman in the bathtub is really interesting because, Danny has his encounter in room 237, which is never seen on screen, and it's a very major moment in the movie, totally off screen. And there's dispute, even amongst the characters about what happened. And, I've certainly talked to people of different...
They didn't film it, right? They never...
It was never filmed. I don't think it was... And I think that's part of the genius of the adaptation. And I think in most contemporary films, they might save it, for the end.
The flashback.
To reveal the horror of what really happened. But we never get that. So in some ways, the closer you look at it, the more it starts to fall apart, like that impressionist painting in Ferris Bueller. He looks closer and closer and closer, and it breaks into dots. And
Pointed at him.
Yeah, and I think The Shining can have sort of a similar, kind of quality to it.
Yeah.
What's interesting because it's the only film of its kind that I'm not a big film rewatcher, and unlike a lot of horror fans, I'll watch the same. Horror films maybe a little bit, but in general, my favorite movies, I tend to watch them once and then savor for years, and then eventually I'll watch them maybe one more time. I've probably seen Shining more than any film I've ever in my life, and anytime it's on TV, I watch the entire film. If I see one shot of it, I watch it from then on. And I have, unlike the people in your film, I have no theories. I have no original ideas. I want to know why it basically has me under its spell compels me to watch. And one thing I was thinking about on the way here was that it is a film that I think most films we watch as a group, even if we watch it alone, I feel like it's aimed at a group viewing, like a group of people in a theater. I feel The Shining might be the only film that is only aimed directly at the one individual watching it, and it pulls you in individual. Like you're watching it. Doesn't matter if you're sitting next to people. It's just you and that movie. Whereas I can't think of many films like them. I think maybe that's part of its power. Whether it's you can't design that, but I just feel like that it's creating like a one-on-one conversation with you or something.
Yeah, I have to agree.
It's weird.
When I saw The Shining for the first time, I have vivid memories of it because it was such a powerful point in my life. I didn't get chickenpox till I was in 10th grade. And because I was so old when I got them really bad. Had them inside my eyelids. I had them down my throat, under my fingernails. It was really bad. But I was running a really high fever and I was out of school for 2 weeks with it. So every day my mom would bring me films and all I did was lay in bed and watch movies. And so I have such vivid memories. It was the first time I saw Rocky Horror. That was the first time I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And she would pretty much
mother of the year.
She would just go clear out the horror section and bring it home to me. And she worked her way through the alphabet. But on one of the days, she brought me The Shining. And I'd never read the Stephen King book or anything like that because that one was one of the thicker ones, which meant I didn't read that one. And she brought me it. And I remember I watched it completely in the house alone because everybody was at work by myself on a Wednesday afternoon with chickenpox and a fever. And I was so scared. And I've seen it that time. And then I saw it one time just a few years ago at a midnight screening. And it was not nearly as scary. And I don't think that it was that I was older. And what's weird is I can still, even though that I've only seen it twice, I mean, I've caught clips of it on TV, but sat down and watched it beginning to end twice in my life. I can still remember every single scene very vividly. I can still remember, the position of the camera and things like that. So
I'd say it's probably only remains scary probably the first time, but there's another quality to it that isn't about the scares so much. It's about needing to keep watching, and maybe it's something to do with unraveling something, even if it's just subconscious. I don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the weird things about the film for me, and I've seen it, maybe 14 times, not including, the process of working on the documentary. But it changes as you change. It certainly changes as, depending what audience you're watching it. But just like in the most basic level, when I first saw it as a little kid, I'm watching it through Danny's eyes, and this is the story about a kid who's unable to stop his parents from making terrible decisions. But, now I'm a dad, and I watch this movie, and I'm like, it's about failing your family, and it's about blaming them for your screw-ups, and it's about turning on them or selling them out for the benefit of, some hollow suits, guys in tuxedos who aren't even promising you anything concrete.
Right.
And in a way, I think that's, kind of worse, that it's all your fault than someone else's.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about, when did you first start kind of analyzing these stories that people were coming up with in terms of their interpretations of what was in the movie? Because you bring up an interesting point. Every time I see it, and I spread it out every couple of years, I always look at it almost from new eyes. The thing that's been amazing in the last couple of years is rediscovering all the Kubrick films on Blu-ray. Yeah. I can't explain it. They look so good on Blu-ray. They're so crystal clear. And I like Clockwork Orange and The Shining, for example. I feel like I'm watching them again for the first time. There's all these details that I'm picking up on the Blu-ray release that for some reason when I watched it on video or even if I saw a revival screening, I never picked up before. So, I mean, that's just a Kubrick thing in general. And I'm more aware of it now as an adult as I watch the movie. But I think maybe I've heard a few Shining theories over the years. Nothing that I was like, oh, I got to look up that and, see how legit it is. But what was it for you that you decided, oh, this is interesting. There's a lot of people that keep seeing some weird shit in this movie. I think this warrants a documentary.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had heard a couple of them, over the years. And they just maybe sort of had this lingering effect of there's more to this movie than meets the eye. And then, what there's specifically, this project got launched. A friend of mine emailed me an essay he found online saying that The Shining was a confession and that Kubrick had been involved in this complicated secret event, that goes back to the 60s, and then this was his mea culpa, and using subliminal techniques and all sorts of, strange devices, that stuff was buried in the movie. And before I even, finished reading the first paragraph, I mean, I was ready to believe. I'm like, there is more in The Shining than the story of these guys, of this family trapped in a hotel. So by the time I had finished reading it, I knew this was a project of some sort. I had finished a documentary, a short one, maybe a year or so before about people who had childhood phobias of the logo for Screen Gems, and which is a totally real thing.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't even remember the Screen Gems logo.
It's kind of like a yin yang with a dot in the center. And I tried to make that one feel kind of like a horror movie to sort of to try to get into to try to get into these kids' heads. And this seemed like a more grown up version of it. Like why is this? People who. These movies, these videos, just gotten under their skin and left a scar that's lasted, and they can't let go of it. So immediately, that seemed like a good thing. Like that seemed like a meaty thing to bring to life, to transform it from prose to some sort of audio video thing. And then me and my friend Tim, who wound up producing the film, said, "Well, let's see what else is out there," because I had remembered that. This guy, Bill Blakemore, who's an ABC journalist, had written about the Native American themes hidden in the movie. A long way back, actually. It was published in newspapers in 1986. And I had a book, Kubrick Inside a Filmmaker's Maze.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
By Thomas Allen Nelson. And there's like a paragraph that sort of unpacks the numerology of the number 237. So, well, there's a couple things out here, because maybe what would be interesting would be to juxtapose different readings and kind of let them fight it out, and see which ones different people gravitate towards. But as soon as we started looking around, we were kind of amazed and a little intimidated by the fact that it was a bottomless pit, that scores of people have been going over this movie with a fine-tooth comb and finding all sorts of like these really compelling, intense, secret, some of it's just allegories or metaphors, but some of it gets deep into numerology or tracing the paths the characters walk as they go through the movie, or looking at the pictures on the wall and what does that all add up to. So, we had sort of stumbled upon a subculture, and one that was really, really interesting. And we spent maybe a year researching, all that stuff, and then, bouncing ideas off of each other and saying, this is really interesting for what it has to say about The Shining. Maybe this also, kind of parallels the way that, folks make sense of all sorts of things. So at a certain point, I just started reaching out to these people and interviewing them, and often they would have these really personal connections to the movie too that would get really interesting, that it would turn out that they would have sort of a two-way relationship to the movie, that it wasn't, sort of a dry game of, like, it wasn't like they were solving a crossword puzzle. They were exploring a mystery that was personal and important, and one that I wanted to get to the bottom of too, though.
And one that's unsolvable now. Because of Kubrick not being with us. No one can ever ask the questions, right?
Well, and if he was here, he wasn't the kind of guy, who said, oh, yeah, no, this movie's about the French Revolution.
Right.
He was happy to let people, kind of, spitball, what 2001 was supposed to be about, or that kind of thing.
Right.
And I know from having talked about 237 for a while that sometimes I try to explain things that I did within the movie and fail, or make something up that sounds good, or steal something that someone else wrote online because it's smarter than what I could come up with. So,
did you have your own ideas about the film in terms of any strange theories that you had already kind of prescribed in your own viewing of it before you started the film?
I think, like, my personal reading of it is, not nearly as complicated or as provocative as what these folks come up with, but I would just see it as, sort of a cautionary tale about, responsibility to your family. And certainly this is the adult. This is the adult me looking at it. Right. But it's don't sell out your family. Don't blame your miserable failings.
Right.
On them. And the parallels, were kind of eerie, because I was working on this movie in front of a keyboard by a big staircase in the middle of the night, as my wife and son would, be kind of roaming through this empty, dark house.
What about the style of the film? Because I guess I have to assume for me that that's the thing. The reason I find it so hypnotic, and if it's on TV, probably why I keep watching, is saying to do it the way Danny bikes down a hall, and because the camera follows him, you kind of follow him. You kind of cast in the position behind
it's amazing. Like those Steadicam shots that draw you in. And like, I think maybe when I walked out of it as a kid, because I was kind of overwhelmed, part of it was the music, because that music just slices through you. And the sound design is like so big in that movie.
And those cuts, the sound cuts to the new day is incredible.
But the camera work, there's something too. I remember when, like, Jack is, walking to that first interview, and, I knew from trailers that things were going to get heavy, and I didn't necessarily want to go into the hotel, but because the camera, it doesn't just pan and look; it travels itself. I kind of had the feeling of, like my feet were on the floor, and I was kind of getting pushed down the hallway, and my feet were gliding, on this really polished, smooth floor, and there's nothing I could do.
That's interesting.
To literally kind of stop that movement. I mean, I think maybe it's also, maybe it was sort of prefiguring kind of first-person shooters.
Right.
And I know, I haven't played one of those in a long time. But, when I used to play them, the world disappears as you're moving down these hallways. Yeah. Just an iris closes around the screen, and you fall, and you find yourself getting pulled into this space.
A few years ago, Cracked actually made a couple of images that were a joke, but it was The Shining as a video game. And it was Danny on his tricycle, and it was done as like a first-person game. And then he, rounds the corner, and the twins are there and everything. It's a really cool little image.
So someone made one for, it might have been Duke Nukem. They might have used that engine. And I think they call it Red Room: The Shining Part 2. And what's great about it is, one thing we talk about in 237 is people have reverse engineered the floor plan of the Overlook Hotel, and it's kind of impossible. It's sort of this MC Escher-esque kind of labyrinth that doesn't add up. And they honored that in the video game version.
That's cool.
that you had to kind of teleport from, I think, this one corner to the other corner, and you go in one door and come out the other, because like there's that scene where Halloran is showing them the pantry, and they kind of go in the door here, then they come out the door here. If you watch the movie 100 times and you are tracking them along on your map as you watch, you'll see that they beam across the hall.
Yeah. That is Star Trek-esque dedication.
Yeah, there's tons of that
floor plans.
Tons of that in his film. I find it's funny because it must have been difficult, at least editing these stories together, because some of the theories I found ridiculous and I didn't buy at all, but that's fine. And some I really thought were kind of legit and interesting, and some I had never thought of before at all. I mean, my personal favorite one, which I totally believe, is the whole confession thing. The whole idea that Kubrick totally filmed the landing on the moon, and he's confessing it in The Shining. Because there's just way too many coincidental things about the Apollo.
You think that Kubrick filmed landing on the
moon?
Well,
the idea would be that
long before The Shining.
I have too, but I always disregarded it really quickly as, oh God, that's crap.
Well, I'm curious. Has anyone ever taken credit as being the camera person? Is there somebody who's famous in America for being the camera person on the moon landing?
You mean besides the astronaut?
Yeah, I mean, was it just a setup on a tripod? Like, I've never actually heard anyone talk about
Are you talking about the official story with the astronauts or the rumored Stanley Kubrick version?
Rumors. Yeah, has anyone ever come out and said...
I don't know that they broke it down to crew positions, but I think one of the reasons that Stanley Kubrick would be on the short list of people to do it is that he would have been fully qualified to have been his own cameraman, and he wouldn't have needed to have brought in a lot of help. I mean, he did this he wasn't a director with a bullhorn. In 2001, he designed a lot of the special effects shots, himself. So, I mean, he was very hands-on, technical, and I think it might have been Spartacus, where, he would get into fights with, his director of photography would walk off the set, and Stanley Kubrick would light it, and then, the DP got the Academy Award for Best Cinematography, and took it in and accepted it anyway. That there have been people who have, in some weird way, say actually Stanley Kubrick was kind of a frustrated director of photography. In some ways, wanted to be more DP than he wanted to be a director.
Yeah. Well, he was a photographer, very strong photographer,
and he certainly had full control of the lensing and the composition and the lighting and almost every element of that of the technical process.
So, following the theory, how did he confess the moon landing in The Shining?
Oh man!
Or is that saying that he should watch it for?
You should watch it, because I could try, but I already had a beer and I'm going to screw up the details. But I mean, there's a lot of subtle little things, but the most prominent being Danny standing up and he's wearing the Apollo shirt, and it's like the way he stands up is the Apollo kind of launching.
Now, had this rumor been spread at the time that The Shining was shot?
Had.
So it could be
well before.
So it could have just been Kubrick's own little John is dead joke.
Yes, and if that's the case, that doesn't discount from the fact that Stanley Kubrick is talking about a fake moon landing within The Shining, which is an amazing thing to discover.
Right. Yeah, it's just another reference. Yeah,
but clearly it's a very loaded image for him to be playing with if he was rumored to have been involved. In which I think the Flat Earth Society nominated him as the most likely guy in the late 60s.
So
and then that story continued.
If it's true or not, that's to me the most fascinating. That was the most fascinating thing to me. I think the one that I thought was ridiculous is there's one I can't remember. Forgive me if I totally butcher this, but there's one where there's somebody's explaining the two guys shaking hands, and at the exact moment that they're shaking hands, it's like the book is obviously an erection or something like that. I was like, I think you're reading a little too much into that one scene, because I don't see that at all. But all right, if that's a theory that you have about that.
Well, that ties into a ton of other sort of subtle sexualized imagery that he sees kind of throughout the movie.
And the guy, that's the one that always struck me as the most sexualized.
The furries. The furries have become a thing, right? The furries. I don't know if that was a thing back then, being a furry. Now there's actually groups of people who meet.
Well, because only one of them was in the costume.
It's only
I don't know.
One guy.
But that's
I think I'm not exactly a furry expert, but I would imagine that they would both be in furry suits.
I think it can go either way, just like any weird fetish.
But actually, what I love about that scene, and I think goes to some of the strength of Kubrick's adaptation of the King novel, is those two characters have a very elaborate backstory in the book, just like the woman in the bathtub does. Mm-hmm. But he deleted all of that information, so you would just be kind of confronted with this baffling tableau, which I think is what I would expect to find, if I was experiencing a genuine supernatural encounter. That, I see some crazy ghost, in a parking garage, and I don't know their life story, and I don't know, why she's dressed like a milkman. And
if you did, it wouldn't be scary. It would actually cease to be scary because you would be empathetic to I feel bad for that ghost because they were killed in this awful way. Whereas if something just pops out, it's terrifying because you don't know why it's there or for what context it is. What was the biggest surprise making this? Like what popped up that you're just like, wow, I didn't see this coming while you're putting, collating these stories, or even made you reappraise looking back at the film going, oh, wow. Obviously you probably had a lot of moments like that, but was there anything that really struck you as just...
Well, there's a ton. Let me just pick one kind of arbitrarily because it made me kind of return to the movie and re-examine stuff. But, there's one guy that we talked to, John Fell Ryan, who has a lot of different things to say, but one thing he kind of dials in on is that dissolves are used in kind of a weird way in the movie, and that they're really common and that they last really long, and they're not necessarily about time passing the way they are in a lot of other films, but they're about creating unusual juxtapositions, and that the intermediate frames are meaningful the way things are in the frame. Like there's a really simple one that as Jack and his family are driving to the hotel and they're on a road that goes through a mountain, it dissolves into a shot of the hotel. So like the vanishing point of the road leads right into the hotel. And then it kind of continues that when the exterior shot of the hotel dissolves into the interior shot, there's like a ladder in the middle of the lobby that really precisely lines up to the A-frame shape of the exterior of the hotel. So it's like the inside and the outside are kind of the same thing. And if you look at like just that interior shot, for someone who's, micromanages the composition of the frame, to the same degree as like Wes Anderson or someone, the prominence of that ladder is really weird on its own, but it makes more sense knowing that he's trying to do this weird crossfade thing.
That could also answer why you get pulled in. This is like, again, with the tracking, it's also pulling you in because each image is going into the next, not giving you a natural break to come out of the movie. Mm-hmm. Like it just keeps going and meshing into itself.
That's interesting, and that they dissolve in a way that's more that's stronger. Like it's a subtler change, from
right than a cut,
or
or George Lucas wipe. Just easy to walk away from.
Well, although those George Lucas wipes are very much trying to cast the movie in the style of a 30s serial,
right?
And it's fun. So it's funny seeing people rip those off without understanding the original reference, and not understanding what it's supposed to say.
Did you think about talking to King about it? I know he does. What you were saying just before about the maybe slightly more abstract, mysterious approach of the film over the book is obviously probably why he didn't like it, I would assume, because he's cutting so much out.
Well, and I think it was really a personal book for Stephen King. Right. That if you watch the Mick Garris the miniseries version, Stephen King and Mick Garris do a commentary track that's really interesting, and Stephen King talks about that the book was really very autobiographical for him. So it may be that, I don't want to speak for Stephen King, but it may be that a change to this story would bother him more than a change to another story, because it isn't just some interesting horror movie. It's kind of his own story about, fighting alcoholism and dealing with, getting his act together with his family.
And that's why he didn't like Jack being cast. That he was really against that because he wanted an everyman. I remember that. That was one thing I remember him saying. He thought it was going to be like a Harrison Ford or something. Like somebody straight.
Yeah, well, I think one of the more common criticisms of the movie is Jack seems crazy from the beginning.
Yeah,
and that he doesn't seem like a nice guy who falls in the course of it.
It's okay. He saw it on the television within like 3 minutes into the movie.
But but when you get to the end of the movie and you've always been the caretaker,
right?
Like if you get into the idea that this is that this is a recurring cycle, then maybe that makes more sense,
right? Yeah, imagine that film if they had a scene before the car. Like it would be. I think it would be so much more static if they'd had the scene with the breaking the arm or the backstory of pulling him to all that stuff would really change. Because instead, you're just planted with these people and they're on their way and it's all happening. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, even in the Stephen King miniseries, it starts at the hotel.
Right.
He's already at the hotel. He's getting a tour, and they're talking about the boiler, which is going to pay off in a big way at the very end.
Right. Yeah. What did you think of that? Did you like the miniseries? Or?
There's a lot of it. I mean, I spent 2 years working on this movie because I find the Kubrick movie this fascinating mind game that I can't pull myself out of. So, that's the one for me. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in the miniseries version too. And he's clearly a nicer. He's clearly a nicer guy
because he's from Wings.
It's Steven Weber. He's just a nice guy anyway.
And so is McGarris. There's no edge to.
Yeah, no, he's an amazing guy.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
I was at a festival at the Stanley Hotel, the original Overlook, a couple weeks ago.
Oh, cool. That's right. I heard about it.
Yeah, no, and I had the amazing good fortune of meeting McGarris and also Leon Vitali, who worked with Kubrick on The Shining, and who plays Lord Bullingdon and Barry Lyndon in Red Cloak and Eyes Wide Shut.
Wow.
He's a legend.
Which is the scene? I know this film also has the Guinness Book of Records for most takes, 126 takes. It's a Shelley Duvall scene, but which scene?
I think it's the one where she's walking up the stairway. I think she's swinging the bat.
And
Jack
Get away.
Oh, okay, that scene. Okay, I thought it was going to be a less important scene. That makes sense. Then,
that's
a key scene.
That's an amazing
Yeah, it's one of the key scenes.
Give me the bat.
But the Scatman thing is just weird. I mean, you're making Scatman eat a cheese sandwich, or was it the walking scene and he just did it till he collapsed?
Yeah, well, and I don't think Stanley Kubrick was the director, or the kind of director who would say, "Okay, that was great. Let's try it like this." Or just be, "Let's do it again. Let's do it again."
Right.
And wouldn't tell you what to do differently. And some people would see that as an opportunity to explore and try different things, and other people, I think, would get stressed out trying to read his mind. It's like, what is it that he wants? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, well, Joe Turkel, I met Joe Turkel once at Monster Palooza. I actually met him. He used to go to the Silver Spoon a lot before it closed down, and I'd always see him, and it was always very exciting. I actually didn't know he was alive, and when he walked in, I remember just getting this overwhelming feeling like, oh my gosh, he's alive. I just assumed. I don't know why, but he was saying he had an interesting quote. He said Stanley wasn't the best director, but he was the finest director, like a fine suit. He was the finest. It was all about the micro details that would all lead, but he wasn't the best communicator and the best director. But he was saying that he would see something on an early take, and the reason he would do something maybe 100 times would be because he saw something early on that the person then didn't replicate until 126 times later. It wasn't because he was actually pushing for something predetermined. It was that he had seen something either in rehearsal or something along the way that he was trying to get back to, but couldn't just tell the person that, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that's a question I've always kind of wrestled with, or wondered. Is he hoping that something that
spontaneous
that he couldn't imagine would happen when you let it go and go? And certainly, I think part of his attack was to buy more time by making each of his days cheaper. Like if you look at the behind the scenes footage of The Shining or even Eyes Wide Shut, they're small crews. It's only a handful of people working on the sets. And it may be, because actually if you look at the lighting design, it isn't Blade Runner. It's kind of like a bigger, softer light.
Well, part of it's Blade Runner.
Well, part of it is Blade Runner. Yes, I stand corrected.
There is a scene from Blade Runner in The Shining.
Part of it is Blade Runner.
Or the other way around, sorry. There's a scene of The Shining in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
But it's not that kind of shafts of light and everything's modeled and it takes 9 hours to light a scene and you've only got about a half hour to get the take before moving on. It's like I think the lighting might have been simpler, smaller crew, so he could work on performance for a long time. I
would love you to make a film just like this on Eyes Wide Shut. I would find that equally fascinating.
Oh my gosh!
No, seriously, I find that equally fascinating.
The material's totally out there. People are flocking to Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh yeah, no, the best film criticism article was Film Comment the year it came out, and I was lukewarm on the film, but I was interested by it. I didn't know what it was, and it was all about it was all Freudian dream theory. Tom Cruise basically reimagining his life after feeling jealousy to be the thing everyone wants and everyone needs him sexually and blah, and just this great, and it just opened up the movie to when I watch it again I was like, yeah, that's the best film he ever made.
Well, the book it's inspired by was clearly Freudian.
Right. It's from Vienna.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do think his work, it just tells us a lot. I mean, your film in general, that's going to say to us it's also a film about how we watch movies, right? How we interpret personally.
I hope
events,
so.
Right?
I hope that it's about more than just The Shining. And some of the more interesting conversations I've had with folks afterwards are about how some idea within 237 inspired thoughts about, some other thing. I know, like, as me and Tim were, batting it around, we were like, does this relate to, the 9/11 truth movement, where different people would look at the same thing on TV and come to different conclusions? Does this have anything to say about, people mishearing Jimi Hendrix lyrics, or maybe people obsessing on, their own lives and kind of reliving, moments from their childhood again and again and trying to figure out what that means. And there were times when we were like, how explicit do we want to get into any of that? Though ultimately we decided, let's just keep on screen. We'll talk about nothing but The Shining, but hope maybe it opens up, some of these other thoughts.
Has King seen your film? Sorry, I'm just curious if King would watch it. I'd be curious to see what he would say about it.
I don't know. McGarris has seen it.
Yeah, he could send it. I'm sure he has the email.
Like, yeah, well, I'm sure King has access to it. He's kind of the person. I would have loved to have. My fantasy, which does not look like it's going to happen, was to get King to do a commentary track. Because in some ways, if this is a game of telephone, where people are trying to figure out what Stanley Kubrick meant, but Stanley Kubrick might have been trying to figure out what Stephen King meant.
Yeah.
So he's
Chinese
God
whispers.
in this scenario.
Yeah, that he started.
And Kubrick's the Bible, the misinterpretation of God, right? So
I guess he's He's God, and
the translation,
the apostles,
and Kubrick is Moses, and then these people are.
Can we record a new segment?
And this is our Shining theory.
Yeah, that's.
I assume have you been to the Kubrick exhibit that's happening
great.
here? Yeah. Because to me, it's the thing about Kubrick's films, in particular Shining, and what I got from that exhibit is he was working on a plane unlike any other person. Like the level of detail in every single movie. I mean, we mentioned a short story from Eyes Wide Shut, which was something he'd apparently been trying to make for since the beginning of his career, which I didn't even realize.
Well, at one point, Steve Martin was going to be in it.
Yeah, I mean,
in the '80s. What would you give to see a 1980s version of Eyes Wide Shut starring Steve Martin
and Kirstie Alley?
Yeah. Well, and there was going to be an Alec Baldwin.
Kim Basinger for a long time. They were because he wanted a real married couple.
I could see that one.
Wow.
There probably would have been more heat and hair, chest hair, a lot more chest hair.
If there was some kind of simulator that could call those into existence.
There's one film I want to recommend because we've been talking about Kubrick today, and no one's seen this film, and I'm really surprised. Monty Hellman directed the good segment of a very bad anthology called Trapped Ashes, but Monty Hellman's story is called Stanley's Girl, and I actually thought it'd be really cool if they had played it at the Kubrick exhibition as an entry, but it's a fictional portrait of Kubrick as a young guy. I think it's set probably after his first couple films, but before he had hit it big. And it's his friendship with a screenwriter, I believe. And basically it's about Stanley's girlfriend. It's called Stanley's Girl. And his girlfriend is very sexual, and it's a very sexual short film. But by the end, Stanley leaves to go make a movie, and his girlfriend stays and ends up sleeping with his friend. And then slowly through it, you realize she's probably this eternal vampiric creature who Stanley had found years later by looking through old films and had seen this footage from the 1920s where she looked the same age as she was now, and he sends it back to his friend, and it's a really, for a 25-minute film, it's really exceptional. And Monty wasn't friends with Kubrick. He explained that he saw him a lot. They would be at the same cafes and diners, but he was always a little intimidated or something like that. But the portrayal of Kubrick is really great. The performance.
Oh, I don't know this movie.
It's because it's buried in a Sean Cunningham really poor anthology. Joe Dante does one of them. Sean Cunningham does the rapper. It's it's not a good.
Trapped Ashes.
Ashes. I think it's on Netflix.
I've never seen
but
it.
Stanley, and also it's not really even a horror film. The short they made, but it has that kind of vampiric.
Yeah.
But it's just a really nice little short drama. And I think it would have been really cool if somebody had included that as part of something like a room you could go watch it because it's just a fun portrait, and it's fun because it ends kind of late Kubrick where he's got all his films and he's cantankerous and he's passed away and the guy gets a message.
When was it made?
It was after Kubrick's death, so probably maybe 2 or 3 years after that, I think.
Oh, so like 2002?
Because he even in the story, he's gone and sends, when he's dead, the guy gets sent a package and opens it up and it says from Stanley, and it kind of explains, remember that girl you felt bad about sleeping? Actually, I was the one screwing you over because I sent you a vampire. Sorry, buddy, but I had to get away. And it's pretty cool, but it's a great little film, and it's like you don't get to discover it because it's kind of sadly buried. The whole film might even be on YouTube, the short by Monty.
Cool.
But
Yeah,
it's
check that out.
Yeah, it's a neat film. But yeah, I mean, one general, just to piggyback before we finish that conversation, is what do you think about King's work in general? Why do you think it makes for such interesting interpretations, even of his work? People seem to really...
Yeah, well, I mean, I had to quit reading Stephen King because he could write faster than I could read.
Yeah. I felt the same way.
As much as I liked him, I found I'm never going to read anything else if I keep reading all of his books.
The Dark Tower alone, it would take you decades.
Right? But, I mean, I think there's some interesting combination of the fact that his prose is so effortless, that you can just fall in. You can fall into it, without any effort, and it's just a really bizarre mix of the fantastical and the mundane. Like the characters in the world are so believable.
The setting of the town is always everywhere in USA. Yeah. That'll be a different theory documentary we'll make.
Well, you know what? Right now, so Room 237 is on VOD right now, and it's still playing festivals.
It's playing in a handful of theaters now.
Okay.
We actually played a lot of screens, from Miami Beach to Anchorage, Alaska, which is kind of nuts for an experimental, subjective documentary.
Right.
But now it's probably easiest to see on iTunes, VOD, or Amazon, and I think late July, maybe. I don't know that we have a hard date yet. The DVD Blu-ray will come out, and we're wrapping up the extras for that thing.
Cool. I mean, obviously, with any kind of documentary, you always have tons of material to choose from that never makes it. So what kind of stuff can we expect? Is there a bunch of stuff that maybe couldn't fit into the movie?
Well, there are deleted scenes that may be audio only.
Okay.
Because the conversations I had with these folks were hours and hours and hours each. And at a certain point, we had to give up the idea of being able to talk about everything in The Shining and everything that these folks had to say, and maybe find a way of suggesting, of taking from these conversations something that had a nice ebb and flow, that there's a structure to it, even if some people... even if it might not be immediately clear to everyone that there is sort of a structure, although if it's a loose structure, where some ideas didn't necessarily have the best place to fit, but if at a couple of twists and turns we tried to say, what we're seeing here is just the twist, just the top of the tip of the iceberg. That both these folks have a ton more to say. There's many moments in the movie we haven't yet to discover, and there's 3 times as many people out there, and they're all still working. So yeah, there's a ton of self-contained little scenes that will hopefully get in there. We're trying to get that panel from the Stanley Hotel, which was me, Mick Garris, Jay Weidner, who talks about the moon landing stuff, and
cool.
Leon Vitali, Stanley Kubrick's assistant on The Shining.
That'd be fun.
And that was moderated by Devin from Badass Digest.
Right.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no. So that was a shot at the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah, that's cool.
In Estes Park, Colorado. So that's, I think that so that panel, I haven't seen the footage. We haven't cut that yet, but that could well be the jewel in the crown.
And the commentary is by Shelley Duvall by herself, right? The whole film is just her discussing.
There is a surprise commentary. I'm not at liberty to
divulge
yet.
Wait, what happened to the boy? Before he finished on The Shining, whatever happened to him?
He quit acting, and he's
Danny?
like a veterinarian or something.
Okay, because I always heard growing up that he went into the woods and was never seen again.
Yeah, he had problems.
He was one of
He's in
those
a mental
poltergeist
home.
stories where he died. And
No, it's best. I think Leon Vitali knows better, but what I heard was, he decided not to be an actor, and he went off, and he's having a normal life, and he's like a happy, well-adjusted, normal human being.
On Facebook.
I haven't seen him on Facebook.
Okay.
Somebody tracked him down like 2-3 years ago and tried to get him to do a convention. And I thought he agreed to it and then maybe canceled.
Yeah,
I can't remember what the story was.
I remember. That sounds so familiar. But
yeah, I have a vague memory of that.
He'd have to pose for so many photos like this. It would just be annoying for him. It'd be awful.
I always heard the stories that he was insane and, had disappeared. And
that'd be tough
like
for kids. So. Yeah, that's the problem. Being one iconic film and,
Yeah, did he might have done one other. I think at some point I knew, but certainly not a ton.
So
can I bring up Shelley Duvall really quick in The Shining?
Always.
Yeah.
Anytime, any show that's 3 women, Shining, anything
I rewatched the movie before coming here, and Is it weird that I sort of find her strangely attractive in the movie?
It's weird. Sorry.
Right?
I don't know.
I don't know if it's because like Jack treats her like such shit that I feel so sympathetic
You feel
and bad
sorry
for her.
for
Like,
her?
I like
she's
her.
so cute. I want to hug her.
Yeah,
Stop
no.
it.
Well, and she tries so hard. She brings him the snacks, and he's such a dick.
Yeah, totally.
But she's really attractive in 3 Women. She's one of those. And this, I find her just like whoa.
Well, she's really dressed in a very unflattering way.
Yeah.
Like she's got like long johns underneath, like this Raggedy Ann dress, which I don't blame her for. And I think that's another, people who are purists about the book who resent the movie are like, she was supposed to be like the top cheerleader at her high school.
Yeah.
But doesn't that feel? I think it works in with your theory about it, which is it's the momification of her, where the husband no longer sees her as attractive. She's just a mom. She's no longer my wife. That's not someone I want to do. She just looks after him and she dresses like that. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to go to the room 237 and
exactly. Well, I mean, there's another reading that we don't quite get to in the film that's very much about sort of disempowered men and the rise of feminism, and he has troubles relating to his he can't relate to his wife in any normal way, and then he sees other women as well. There's the sexy woman in room 237, and there's the crone, and those are like the only binary possibilities of his limited play of the limited way that he can relate to women, and he's barely employed and very threatened by all of them. So there's a lot to say about that. You could spend some time sort of exploring gender relations in the movie, especially late 70s, early 80s America.
Right.
I was always bothered by the word correct, which they say, my wife was doing something, so I corrected her, and my children was doing something. And that one word has just always stood out to me more than anything.
Feels like a throwback. It feels like he's speaking from a different language, from an earlier era, almost.
And I wonder if he also has sort of a British accent.
He does.
I'm wondering if that's a more common way to talk about disciplining your kids over there.
I don't know.
But that word correct is such a brutal euphemism.
Yeah, it's just the most punchy, pointed word of the whole movie.
But you could beat your wife with a ruler the size of your thumb in England at that point, even till I think 1985.
The size of your thumb?
The width of your thumb, you could beat your wife with a ruler,
and
they could actually measure that
demonstrating
in the
with
law.
his thumb right now.
Yes.
And I'm holding on my thumb, but it's true, and so it could have come from that kind of mentality.
Well, that whole conversation with Grady is so interesting.
Yeah,
and there's, the viciously racist way that he refers to Halloran, and when Jack kind of repeats it, you get the sense that like this is only like the first time he's ever said that word aloud, because like he's a school teacher, from like Vermont or New Hampshire, Maine, I guess, or Maine,
right.
Who I'm sure voted Democrat and is a liberal, equal rights kind of guy, but because he wants acceptance, into the country, into this posh country club, he's going to he can throw that all away. And the same thing about, the notion that he's supposed to, respect his wife as an equal. No,
right.
I guess I need to correct her like a child. It's really.
There's no way to make this show on this movie this short. That's why we're gonna have to skip on. Wait, before you mention news, we should tell his news.
Oh no, he's got some new projects I wanted to hear about because
Well, let's stick to the horror
one.
one.
Of my favorite topics.
Okay. The horror one or the other?
Well, the horror one is ABCs of Death 2, right?
Yeah.
You've been cast.
Congrats on that.
Yeah, you have a
it's very
segment.
exciting. I don't have my letter assigned yet, but I've been asked to do one of the 26 shorts in the next volume of ABCs of Death.
It will be M. It will be M. I
M, huh?
don't know why. Putting it out there now.
All right. That's
I'm feeling X.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Rob has no comment. Pick a letter.
You gambling man there, Rob? Come on.
I'll go with X as well. There we go.
Okay.
Our money's on X.
Awesome. Well, yeah, because that'd be the home stretch too. X is probably a sweet spot.
Yeah,
I would think
you don't want to
so.
be the lead off. You don't want
to
be
be the lead off, and you don't want to respond, and you don't necessarily want to be Z.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to cap the whole film. It's a lot of pressure. Yeah. And then you've got another iron in a fire.
Yeah. Well, Vernon Chapman, the guy from Wonder Show's in The Heart She Holler, producer on South Park, and Louis C.K. Produced a comedy album based on previously unheard tape recordings by Andy Kaufman, and I edited with him. So that'll be coming out on Drag City come July.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's about 45, maybe 50 minutes, cut down from the 84 hours that were
oh my goodness.
that were unearthed back in the day.
Cool.
Wow, that's an intense editing job.
Yeah.
Our news is going to have to be quick bullet point news. Otherwise, we're going to hit our long mark.
Okay, so some news for today. So Spike Lee has decided to go right up against Paranormal Activity 5 and is releasing Old Boy at Halloween, same weekend as Paranormal Activity 5, October 25th.
Right on.
So who do you guys think is going to take the
Paranormal
box
Activity
office?
5.
I don't know. I kind of want to see if it's like a total crap show.
Well, it's hard to know because the last film was so weak. The last Paranormal, but this will tell us whether audiences have a soul or if they just go to whatever. It just comes up.
They go to whatever. Nobody's going to know what
they're
Old Boy
hypnotized.
is. Nobody knew what Let Me In was. So
Who's the star of Old Boy?
is.
Who's the star? Who's the old boy?
Oh, Brolin.
Josh Brolin.
Yeah. So even more so, even though that's a great choice, even less people will go because they don't know who Brolin is.
I'm anxious to see what Spike Lee does with it, just because all of his films are so race based, and so I'm anxious to see how this leaks his way in.
Who's the bad guy?
I don't know who is playing the bad guy.
I forgot. I totally forgot. That's how little I'm paying attention.
Yeah,
I was actually really bummed out because back when I think I might have mentioned this on the show already, but back when I worked at Amoeba, Spike Lee came in and asked what the other movies in the Vengeance trilogy were because he'd never seen them.
Are you serious?
And we're like, oh, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance. And he bought them on the
You
spot.
didn't just tell him, hey, there's this thing called IMDb.
There's that.
It's a great research tool.
Which is fine. I mean, I don't mean to critique any filmmaker's taste, but it's kind of like if you're remaking, like if you're a well-established director, I figure you'd watch like other directors that are like, Chandler Park is one of the best out there right now. I figure you'd at least be familiar with
Sometimes when people are doing remakes, I've heard this many times where people have done remakes where they've purposely avoided seeing material because they just fall into traps repeating things.
Sure.
Or they say they didn't see it.
So I'm anxious to see which one takes the box office. We also got word this week Scream Factory is unleashing Psycho 2 and Psycho 3 on Blu-ray.
I love Psycho 2.
Yeah, Psycho 2 is a great movie.
I'm a big fan of Psycho 3, though, because it's got the nun.
They're both good.
You guys know I love my nunsploitation.
I think Psycho 2 or 3, I can't remember. One of them is more Hitchcockian than any Hitchcock film. It just has all the elements.
3.
3.
Three's got a lot of
I kind of don't remember
to it.
3, but 2 made an impression on me.
Perkins did 3 or 2.
Yeah, 2 is great. Perkins directed 3.
Yeah, that's the reason it feels so
Is that the one with the
bizarre.
girl in the ice chest?
Yes. That's
Okay.
in 3.
Yeah, it's totally Hitchcock.
Yeah. No, but even more than it's one of those few, like De Palma's. Like, there's moments where you're like, even Hitchcock wouldn't have done that effect that many times. It's cool though. It's a cool movie. They're very underrated, those 2 films.
I'll hopefully be giving some stuff up for those releases.
Yeah,
because Shout Factory put out my documentary, which neither of you have probably watched yet. The Psycho Legacy.
If you were a guest on our show, I would have watched it.
Yeah, maybe we should have him on as a guest.
Let's just do a screening at Jump Cut. Let's do it.
I guess.
Is it long?
It's 90 minutes.
Okay.
It's 90 minutes. It's pretty brief. So, we also got this one was like a huge debate that I saw online going back and forth. So the Jurassic Park 4th film that is coming up soon, everybody had been saying it was going to be a sequel, and then Sam Neill came out and said, oh no, it's a remake, and it's been going back and forth this whole week.
First of all,
debating.
First of all, who cares? That's the first.
Second of all, Sam Neill's drunk on his own wine and hanging around New Zealand.
That's true. I heard everyone was just taking his words out of. He said something like, "Oh, it's like a reboot. It's like the new thing."
He actually says it's a total rejig. Is the actual quote?
Rejig.
Rejig.
So I think
But that could be a Kiwi slang.
Never trust the lead actor.
Never trust Sam Neill.
He also said they're doing a sequel to Possession, and I don't buy that. Yeah.
We also got some more casting news off of the new American Horror Story Coven, and it looks like they are going to be picking up. Why did I cut it off? It's Emma Roberts.
It's Emma Roberts.
Yeah, I cut it off my sheet, but it's Emma Roberts.
Hopefully do a far better job than she did in Scream 4.
Yeah, exactly. It's Julia Roberts' niece.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, she was in Scream 4 terribly. So I'm hoping that, she does well in Coven, which I am super psyched about. And then let's see here. Human Centipede 3 finally started shooting here in Los Angeles.
What's the premise?
More.
There is it's going even more down the.
Is it more meta?
Yeah, it's even more meta because now the director is one of the people.
Six.
Tom Six is and the Dr. Dieter from the first one, who is now the actor Dr. Dieter.
Who looks like Purple Tentacle from Nintendo.
So now the director and actor from the first are now part of the narrative. So they will somehow. He's not.
On paper, I like that.
Oh yeah, on number.
It's going to be batshit crazy.
Number 2, I found so much more interesting than number 1. Once it became a horror film, it became less interesting. But the meta side of it, I was so surprised by that I just instantly kind of went, "Oh, okay, this isn't what I thought it was going to be." So I like that he's gone that direction.
It was a cool idea because after 1, it was kind of like, well, what can you do with that now?
Right?
Like, there's nothing. Everybody's
dead.
We're just done. So I did like the let's use a fan element.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So.
But
the
number 3
filmmaking was terrible. I didn't like the filmmaking on number 2. It sucked.
Either of them. But yeah, no, it's interesting that he's very tight-lipped though. Beyond that, I don't know. There was a big Twitter thing where they were suing each other, and I think it was probably a
publicity
bullshit. Yeah,
it was probably
he made it seem like Dieter didn't want to be back in it, and they went into this big lawsuit. And I get the feeling like it was just to get people eyeballing it.
I would definitely think so.
Who knows? Yeah, it's interesting.
More segments.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm going to watch your movie tonight. I'm inspired now to revision and then I'll write you back.
Aside from some lame other news, anything else that happened this week?
No. Psycho 2-3 news is the big news for me.
That was my excitement.
I haven't seen the Bates Motel final either, so I'm going to watch that probably.
I will say,
if you want, me and Brian Collins were on Ryan's show this week to talk about the finale of Bates Motel. So,
and this week, if you like film on film at Jump Cut Cafe, we are showing
that sounds so sexy.
Our Secret 16 film this week. I can't tell you, it's a TV movie by one of the masters of horror that has almost never been seen on film because it was on TV, but this is a film print starring one of his major collaborators. So there's some big clues there.
Yes,
we will also be saying a short film by the said director that there are only 2 prints in existence.
College film.
Yeah, his college film, USC or some other UCLA or some new NYU.
Which was a
one of those schools.
Question.
I'm just gonna say, it was a trivia question. One of those schools have a short film that led to one of his major films, and only USC owns the print, and somehow our colleague got a copy of that print, probably illegally. And we will be showing that. So probably only a handful of people in the world have ever seen this. So we're going to be showing them Sunday at 8 o'clock at Jump Cut.
I will also, before we part for the night, I will give Fangoria's big news for this week. Well, we have 2 big news this week.
You're only allowed one.
I'm doing 2. We released our Carpenter edition. So a couple of years ago, we did the George Romero edition. And these aren't like actual issues of Fangoria. They're special editions. And we only did 1,000 print run of Romero a couple of years ago, and it sold out like within 3 days. And so we did a 2,000 print run of Carpenter, and it's almost gone now. So,
do you have any spare ones? Because I really want to read.
Yeah, is it new stuff, or is it like a combination? Like do you collect a bunch of stuff over the years?
It's all new stuff.
Oh, cool.
Like the Romero one was great. It was a really good issue.
The commentary on In the Mouth of Madness is from me.
And, cool.
I definitely, that's my favorite Carpenter film. That, and I can't believe I say this out loud, but Ghosts of Mars. So I highly,
you and Elijah, Elijah convinced me to watch it again. I hated it. I was just like, this is one of the worst. I hate it. I don't know why I hate it, but I
love it.
We might have missed it last week, but Prince of Darkness is also a Scream Factory release that's coming out soon. So
it is. And their most requested of all titles, which is interesting to me.
Jeff Nelson mentioned here. And now
we also had, there was another Carpenter question, was highest grossing film of all time, and I actually was debating Prince of Darkness. It isn't. It's Starman. So.
Yeah, because that's the Oscar.
Yeah, that's the big one. But and then the other Fango news this week is that we are bringing back Gore Zone. It's going to be subscription based, and we're doing every other month, and it comes back sometime this fall.
Cool. So, that would be fun.
Yeah. Cool.
Maybe they'll sponsor our show. Killer POV from Gore Zone. That could be good.
I'll question a few people on that.
Okay. I like that idea.
Thanks so much. Find us on our Facebook page. Like it if you don't already. Back me up and let me know that you find Shelley Duvall attractive in The Shining as well. I'd like to not be the only one here. And find us on Twitter. I'm at IconsRobG. Rodney, are you on Twitter?
It's Rodney _Ascher.
At Twitter or something.
At Twitter.
On the Twitter.
I'm going to follow you
at
right
Rodney
away.
I'm just Rebekah McKendry.
Yeah, I am too. I'm Rebekah McKendry, just with a hashtag 2 next to it.
Oh my God, doppelganger.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for joining us. Room 237 is available on plenty of video demand, some festivals, some cities. Rewatch The Shining before? Would it be good to watch or after? Okay.
After.
If you've never seen The Shining, see it before. But if you've seen it at any point in your life, watch it again afterwards. So then you can verify what you've seen.
And if you really want to get into, watch Sleepwalkers first, and then watch this, and you'll just be like
Langoliers.
Oh, Langoliers.
Langoliers.
The Mist, but the black and white.
The black and white version. Yeah.
Tommy knockers, knocking at your door. That's it all. We will see you guys next week.
Thanks for joining us, Rodney.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Thanks, guys.